Tonight on Talking Points, another mass killing rocks the nation.
One thing everybody wants to know is, why did this happen?
26 are dead following the mass shooting at a Texas church, and police continue to search for a motive from the suspect.
We'll have more on that coming up. Some of the world's most prominent individuals are being implicated in a document dump that's tied them to offshore tax havens.
A corruption probe in Saudi Arabia leaves princes and top officials facing charges. It could amount to the biggest change in Saudi governance in the last 8 decades. Here's what the Saudi foreign minister had to say about it on CNN.
I can assure you that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia takes very, very seriously the issue of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
And a new report released by 13 U.S. federal agencies says humans are causing climate change, breaking with what many Trump officials have been saying.
We have all that and more ahead. This is Talking Points. The investigation continues into the mass shooting that killed 26 and injured 20 in a Texas church. I'm Josh Carney.
And I'm Mike Riccardi. Today, the country mourns the loss of innocent civilians at the hands of another senseless gunman. It's the latest mass shooting to hit the U.S. and the deadliest in Texas history. Dressed in body armor, the suspect used a military-style rifle to kill 26 at a Sunday church service in a small South Texas town. Of them, the Wilson County Sheriff says 12 to 14 were kids. The suspect killed himself shortly after the attack. It comes just 35 days after the deadliest shooting in U.S. history was carried out in Las Vegas.
As with many of these incidents, the questions remain, why did the shooter do it? Authorities say the suspect's problems with his ex-wife's family could have something to do with it. The shooter texted his mother-in-law Sunday morning before carrying out the attack. She was a regular attendee of the church but was not there Sunday. Something to note in all this, the suspect received a bad conduct discharge from the Air Force after assaulting his wife. But because the Air Force failed to submit his criminal history to the FBI, the shooter was able to pass a background check to purchase the gun. Texas Senator Ted Cruz spoke today about the horror in his home state.
We don't need politics right now. You know, I would note in New York we saw a terror attack just this week with a truck. Evil is evil is evil.
So right there, right, we have Senator Ted Cruz saying that we don't need politics right now. And when you think back, a lot of Republicans said the same thing after the Vegas shooting. That was 35 days ago. Haven't heard about it recently, and you also haven't heard about gun control efforts in the time in between. So my question is, when do you talk about it? And I understand they don't, they're not the biggest fans of gun control, and they have this belief, maybe some do, that, if we give Democrats an inch, they'll take a mile. But I mean, you have to have some sort of solution. It can't just be the price of freedom.
Absolutely right, and it isn't the price of freedom. The idea that we're just going to continue to wait and that it is never the right time is a logical fallacy at this point as these continue to happen. One thing that I'm concerned about with this particular case is the fact that the FBI and the Air Force dropped the ball in terms of reporting that information and thus saving these lives. It's not a direct fault, but it certainly goes to show that in terms of solidifying how these background checks can be done in the right way, it needs to be a cooperative effort that clearly has to deal with multiple agencies. So it's certainly going to be a progressive effort, but it needs to start a discussion sometime soon.
And to be quite honest, I really don't think that a lot of what Democrats put forth could hold anything meaningful, that is, could really hold up in court. You have the Second Amendment, and it's based on recent rulings going back to 2008. It's pretty clear what, the Supreme Court views the Second Amendment as. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you could really pass meaningful legislation, but I think you have to at least try. Mm-hmm. And like President Trump said, this is a mental health issue, but you go back to February, President Trump and Republicans passed a bill that made it easier for people that are mentally ill to get guns and forego the National Gun Registry.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly a critical problem and something that we're going to be paying attention to not only on this show, but across the nation.
Definitely. After the break, we'll look into the newly released Paradise Papers that are exposing elites around the globe for tax abuse. It links Queen Elizabeth, among others, with tax havens offshore. Stay with us.
ask those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Some of the world's largest corporations and wealthiest people are facing scrutiny for tax abuse following a series of documents released yesterday, now dubbed the Paradise Papers. We have Talking Points contributor Gabrielle Caracciolo in studio to break down the revelations.
The Paradise Papers is a leak made public by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists based on over 13.4 million documents from 1950 to 2016. These records come mainly from offshore law firm Appleby and corporate service provider Estera. The papers cover a large number of the wealthiest people and corporations in the world and how they make use of offshore accounts in order to avoid taxes and hide their assets. Among those whose finances are mentioned in these papers are Queen Elizabeth II, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, Russian billionaire Yuri Milner, Jared Kushner, Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, a key advisor to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and a top donor of Britain's Conservative Party. Among the more prevalent of the paper's revelations is the confirmation that Ross maintains stakes in a shipping firm with a principal client from Russia, even after swearing into his cabinet position. Additionally, companies including Nike and Apple have allegedly tried taking advantage of offshore tax shelters. However, it's important to note that not all offshore dealings are necessarily illegal. The ICIJ has placed a disclaimer on their website saying there are legitimate uses for offshore companies and trusts. We do not intend to suggest or imply that any people, companies, or other entities included in the ICIJ offshore leaks database have broken the law or otherwise acted improperly. Many people and many entities have the same or similar names. And while these papers do not accuse those mentioned of criminal wrongdoing, the ICIJ says these papers are meant to unveil the secret behaviors of powerful people and corporations involved in offshore dealings.
By tomorrow evening, the states of New Jersey and Virginia will have elected new governors. Democrat Phil Murphy and Republican Governor Chris Christie's lieutenant governor Kim Guadagno are battling for the governorship in New Jersey. And a highly contested Virginia comes down to Democrat Ralph Northam and Republican Ed Gillespie. Talking Points contributors Dan Prager and Jack Watson are here to tell us what's at stake this Tuesday night and what issues might decide the two states' elections. Jack, Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great to be here.
So I want to get right into the major issues of these elections. In the last couple of weeks, in Virginia specifically, the race is tight, and it looked like Gillespie had the lead there. Now it looks like it might be swinging to the Republican. I mean, the federal or the Confederate monuments have been a huge deal there. I mean, what do you think of the race moving forward?
They have been a huge issue, Mike, and that's because of the riots in Charlottesville a few months ago. I mean, this really comes down to race relations at their prime. And this is a really, really interesting election to look at in Virginia in particular, because it's sort of a microcosm for what we can expect in the 2018 Senate elections. The Washington Post, an opinion article, stated, quote, "This matters even if you don't live in Virginia because dozens of Republicans across the country are going to follow Gillespie's playbook in 2018 if it works." And as we said, it's already very tightly contested, with some numbers putting it at 48 to 43 in favor of Northam.
And in New Jersey, there's still a culture war going on. It's more on a sanctuary state. Of course, that's more of Phil Murphy is going toward making New Jersey a sanctuary state. Guadagno is not in favor of that. Now, it's really symbolic gesture is what I was trying to say before. It's a symbolic gesture. It doesn't really mean anything, but it will show what they feel about Trumpist policies, and you're going to see this culture war of, do we accept more immigrants? Do we make the country more of a sanctuary, or do we not? And that election that's kind of one of the focuses of the New Jersey election.
Now, the polling between the Virginia governor's race and Gillespie and Northam is only a 5-point spread from that latest Fox News poll. So what do these polls mean moving forward, and how is that kind of going to dictate the race?
The polls might play a bit more of a significant role in Virginia because as we said, it's very tight. But the polls in New Jersey are a lot more widely spread. A poll in late October showed that Murphy was way far ahead, as much as 14 points ahead on Guadagno.
There was one that came out today, Murphy up 12 on Guadagno. You were saying in Virginia it's a lot closer. I've seen some just as recently as today. You see a 9-point to 2-point spread. So we're really all over the place there. And plus, remember, last year these polls really didn't hit the mark. So there's always that margin of error. It's a pretty large margin of error where you could see Gillespie take over there.
Well, Dan, earlier you mentioned Trumpism. I mean, what sort of role do you think this is playing in these elections?
I think it's a huge role all across the country. One of the biggest political issues is, how do you feel about this rise of Donald Trump and his policies? And I think a lot of this is going to be a referendum, especially in Virginia, which is known as a swing state. They went blue in 2016. Jersey, great state in New Jersey, is a blue state, and they're probably going to end up going blue. But Virginia, it's really interesting to see how for 2018 they're going to decide between those two candidates, because it really could be a referendum on Republicans and how they've kind of transferred over to Trumpism.
Dan, thanks so much for your input. Jack as well. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on this race for the next several hours. The George Washington Bridge scandal is still fresh in the minds of... Up next, there are 13 federal agencies that are reporting climate change is what many in the Trump camp are saying, and we will take a look at that moving forward.
Got a quarter?
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
A U.S. government report on climate change asserts that the Earth has warmed significantly in the last 100 years, and that humans are driving that change. It's being considered the U.S.'s most definitive statement on climate change, though top Trump officials continue to express skepticism about human-induced warming. We have Talking Points contributor Byron Tollefson here to talk with us about the report. Byron, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What are some of the highlights from this report?
Well,
the bold statement, or the statement that they make, is that humans are the dominant cause of climate change. It was very definitive, and they say that there's no convincing alternative other than humans for doing so. They also make a few predictions by the end of the century of what will happen with climate change, and a few of them are more wildfires, more frequently of those, more flooding, and more droughts. And it also says you can't rule out a global sea level rise up to 8 feet by the end of the century. So some big statements in that report.
The results of this report ultimately reflect a difference in what Trump officials have said over throughout the campaign and throughout the beginning of the administration. So what has been the White House's response to these revelations?
Yeah, it's definitely a big shock that they approved this report, as it goes against some things they have done, like Trump getting rid of the Paris Accord. In addition to that, you have the EPA chief, Scott Pruitt, saying that carbon dioxide is not a big contributor to global warming. So the White House spokesperson, Ross Shaw, came out and said that there's still uncertainty in the sensitivity of Earth's climate to greenhouse gas emissions. He also said that the climate is always changing.
Now, Byron, you did mention that earlier that this is the most definitive statement by the U.S. on climate change. Why so?
Well, you have 100 experts and academics backing this statement, and what's significant about it is how extremely likely and confident they are that humans are the cause of climate change.
Now, this goes directly with against what the administration has said in the past. So, given the fact this report has come out, do we expect anything to change moving forward?
Well, the United Nations is meeting in Germany this week, and the U.S. is actually expected to face a lot of blowback for Trump's Paris Accord decision. There's also another report supposed to come out relatively soon, like this one, except it's going to focus on regional aspects of climate change and how it affects more local areas than a widespread statement.
And, you know, looking forward, even though President Trump did pull us out of the Paris Climate Accord, we're still going to be in until 2020. What sort of impact do you think the U.S. might have in the next couple of years now that this statement has been released?
Well, it's definitely I don't want to say a flip-flopper, but it's really surprising the U.S. would back it. I can't really predict what Trump and the administration will do going forward, but it's definitely significant, from going to backing out of the accord and deleting facts about climate change on the EPA's website to now letting this report go forward. It really remains to be seen. One other interesting tidbit about this is that Trump apparently wasn't that aware of this report's existence until it came out.
Byron, thank you.
Thank you.
Former DNC head Donna Brazile explains in her new book how the DNC favored Hilary Clinton in the primaries, detailing the agreements made between Clinton and the DNC that gave Clinton a systemic edge. In fact, in a September 2016 phone call to Bernie Sanders, Brazile said, "I did find the cancer." Talking Points contributor Galat Malamed is here to explain. Galat, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what are the ties between the fundraising effort that Donna Brazile is claiming was tied to the Clintons, and how did it affect the primaries?
Right, so the joint fundraising agreement that was signed with the DNC and the Hillary for Victory Fund, basically it said that funds you raise is going to be tied into the DNC, which is not really the issue. Bernie Sanders had that same agreement. Kind of more where the issue lies is when this agreement was signed, August 2015, and it gave Hillary kind of control over the DNC way, way, way early in the primary season. Usually a candidate doesn't get this control over the DNC until they're essentially the for sure nominee of the party. And there was also an additional memorandum to this agreement, and it gave them control over staffing things. They could put in say of who they wanted the staffers to be, review choices that were made for staffers. So that was really where the difference was.
So, like we said before, Donna Brazile did call Bernie Sanders. Obviously, whether we don't know how much exactly he knew was going on,
right,
he can't be pleased. What exactly has been the response from him?
Yeah, Jeff Weaver, his campaign manager, has been speaking out a lot about this over the weekend, and here's what he had to say about it.
Rank and file of the Democratic Party should choose the nominee of the party, not party elites. And for too long, party elites have dominated what goes on at the very top of the Democratic Party, and the rank and file of the party, millions and millions and millions of people across this country, have been shut out. That has got to stop.
So there you have it. It kind of confirms what they were saying all along, is that you know, it was really just an establishment effort to kind of shut them out, and we need more of a they want a more grassroots movement, more of a ground up, really back to the people and the states, not this DNC and the national movement.
Given that people are still reeling from these revelations and the fact that this book hasn't even come out yet, it's just been Donna and the Washington Post sort of breaking down advanced copy, what does this mean, and how big are these revelations, and more importantly, are these revelations going to impact something in the future?
Well, I think the biggest revelation has to be that she seriously considered removing Hilary Clinton and Tim Kaine off the ticket. She wanted a Joe Biden, Cory Booker ticket, and kind of when she came to this realization, it was in September, just 2 months before Election Day. She was seriously considering doing this. It's questionable whether she would have been able to. She has authority on this, but not full control over this. So I think something interesting that comes out of this is she mentioned she wanted Cory Booker as a VP, and I think moving ahead in 2020, he's definitely going to be a potential candidate for the Democrats.
Definitely going to shake things up in 2020. You know, huge revelations. We'll have to wait till the entire book comes out to see exactly what Donna Brazile has to say. Galat, thanks so much for being here. 17 top officials in Saudi Arabia, among them one of the world's richest men, now face corruption charges. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman led an anti-corruption probe over the weekend in what amounted to the biggest changes to Saudi governance in over 8 decades. We have Talking Points contributor Elijah Shama in studio to break it all down. Elijah?
Thanks. Late Saturday night, Saudi-owned news broadcaster Al Arabiya announced the arrest of 17 princes and top officials in what they claimed was a corruption crackdown by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The arrest came without any charges or legal process, but the targets signal a coup de grace of Saudi Arabia's old guard. With the arrest of Prince Mutayeb bin Abdullah, who heads a major security service in the country, 32-year-old Salman now exerts direct control over the country's 3 major security services: the military, internal security services, and National Guard. The young Crown Prince has already shown his desire for quick change in the kingdom, granting women the right to vote and unveiling Vision 2030, a bold new economic plan to reduce the kingdom's dependency on oil, which is what makes the arrest of businessman Prince Alawid bin Talal so confusing. Talal, who is estimated by Forbes to be worth $17 billion, was supportive of the Crown Prince's economic reforms. Arresting him may very well hurt Salman's push for greater foreign investment. It does, however, send a message that no one is above arrest in the kingdom. President Trump called King Salman shortly after news of the arrest in what is seen by many as a sign of support, although official transcripts of their conversation show the topic was never discussed. One thing is for certain, though, these arrests mark a definitive shift in power for the kingdom formed in 1932.
This past week, including a UN deal to reduce cocaine production and a health crisis for refugees in Papua New Guinea. Don't go away.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice, single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Here we go. We're gonna go out there in the rain. We're gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Okay, quick. Oh yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. We're getting so wet.
Some stories don't receive the mainstream attention they deserve. This week on Talking Points, we look at Colombian deal with the UN to reduce drug production and humanitarian issues faced by refugees in Papua New Guinea. Colombia is taking steps to reduce the production of cocaine in the South American country. The country signed a $300 million deal today with the UN that aims to lower production of the drug. Farmers will be compensated by the Colombian government if they switch from growing coca to other crops. Coca is the raw material used in the manufacturing of cocaine. Farmers are encouraged to grow crops such as coffee or cocoa in the place of coca.
According to the UN, each year the area of land used to cultivate coca grows by 50%. Analysts say that land increase is in part due to the treaty Colombia signed with FARC rebels. Under the peace deal, the FARC let go of control of drug production at land and helped to encourage farmers to not plant coca. However, some farmers took advantage of the time it took the government to pass legislation and planted coca in the interim, knowing they would be compensated for letting go of the crop later on.
Male refugees in a detention center in Papua New Guinea are struggling with health problems. Reported cases include kidney pain, collapsing, and various infections. Over 600 people lack electricity, food, and water at the Australian-run Manus Health Centre. Although the center has been closed since late October, the refugees refuse to be relocated, which is said to be a direct cause of the health problems. The center had to be shut down because it was ruled unconstitutional by the Papua New Guinea court.
Lawyers for the refugees have filed a court case to fight for the men's basic needs, while an advocacy group has set up a medical treatment to aid them. This comes shortly after the Australian Prime Minister rejected an offer from New Zealand to relocate 150 of its refugees. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says that this will encourage smugglers in the country. So far, 6 men have died at the Manus Center since 2012.
After a short break, Mike and I will go over the stories you should be watching in the week ahead. We'll be right back.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he would flap his arms again and again.
One day, I found out I had something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
The Federal Communications Commission announced a plan in April to undo Obama-era net neutrality policies, and now that plan may finally come true. The FCC is scheduled to reveal a specific proposal for a rollback of net neutrality later this month that would lead to internet service providers making some content easier to view than others. Comcast and Verizon executives met with FCC Chair Ajit Pai this past week in an effort to block states from proactively passing their own internet laws ahead of any vote. The fight for free and fair access to the digital community that has progressively consumed our world is one of the biggest fights of the year, and the results could set a new global precedent for a world that's online. I will be looking ahead to not only the fight over the potential vote, but how this battle impacts the telecommunications economy on a global scale.
I'm looking ahead at shakeups to the Federal Reserve. Just 2 days ago, CNBC reported that the New York Federal Reserve Bank president, William Dudley, plans to announce his retirement with an end date sometime early next year. This report comes just days after President Trump announced plans to replace Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen. Following this retirement of the Vice Chairman Stanley Fischer just weeks ago, the Fed could soon be changing their 3 most important members. Dudley was an important player as one of Yellen's allies on gradual rate hikes, but also because the New York Federal President is the only regional president with a permanent seat on the Federal Open Market Committee. And that's all the time we have for tonight. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and all of our content on our website.